Hello and thanks for tuning into the show that goes around the continent to bring you stories near and far. I'm Chamberlain Osoa, Channels Television here in Lagos. I'm joined by Vincent McCory from Voice of America in Washington.
Well, thanks. I'm Vincent McCory at the Voice of America. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Chamberlain Osoa in Lagos brings you that story.
A strategic roadmap to address the humanitarian challenges as well as disaster management in the country has now been launched by the federal government of Nigeria. Presenting the roadmap in Abuja, the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development, Mrs. Sadiya Umar Farouk, states that the 5-year plan has 7 focal points. This includes implementation, monitoring, evaluation, review and reporting mechanisms that will be deployed to ensure effective results.
The Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management and Social Development is mandated to provide effective coordination of all humanitarian interventions. To effectively execute the presidential mandate, the ministry developed a roadmap tagged Mapping Out a Life of Dignity for All. The roadmap is expected to guide the ministry's operations to achieve this mandate.
We have provided detailed information on each of the strategic pillars, providing the background and objective, highlighting the key action plans, and identifying the key stakeholders. Your Excellency, the roadmap has also clearly demonstrated the activities that must be carried out under the planning, implementation, coordination, monitoring, and evaluation phases of each strategy. Our stakeholders have been carefully mapped out and grouped into clusters, and the interweaving relationship between the clusters have been clearly delineated in this roadmap.
Taking measures through our armed forces, security services, and the law enforcement agencies to address the security situation and restore peace to our communities. It is clear that humanitarian interventions must proceed on a parallel track to ensure that volatile areas are restored to a sustainable peace.
The roadmap is a product of wide consultation and cohesive analysis, as the United Arab Emirates has now committed $2 million to support visually impaired persons in the northern part of the country.
We have also worked in the north of Nigeria to support those who have visual impairments through our Noor Dubai Foundation, a $2 million program which has been implemented over the past 3 years and is planned to be continued in Katsina State and the surrounding states.
As the strategic roadmap is officially launched, the ministry notes that the most critical aspect of the plan is in the implementation as it seeks to achieve the presidential mandate.
Joining us now is Olutunji Larba, a human rights activist. Thank you for joining us on Africa 54. Tell us, what are your thoughts on this strategic roadmap that has now been launched to address humanitarian challenges in the country?
Oh, I looked at the document. I think it's a very beautiful document. It was well thought through. And going through it, I felt for a moment, that I think this is one of the times when we need to give some kudos to government for most of the agencies, some of the agencies, and many of the programmatic intervention that are falling under the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management were not existing pre-2015 in this country. And I'm talking about, there's a National Center for Senior Citizens, there is an alternate school program, and there's also a commission for people living with disability, which also came into force over this period of time. And there are about 10 programmatic interventions and that has come from the ministry over the last couple of years. I saw the grant for rural women, which many people may not be aware of. We are more familiar with the hand power. We are more familiar with the national home, the homegrown school feeding program. We're familiar with the trader money, the GEEP, the government empowerment and enterprise program. But there are so many other ones on the side that are actually really, if well implemented, if they are religiously and effectively implemented, will transform the landscape of the humanitarian ecosystem in Nigeria and the social intervention programs. Many of them, conditional cash transfer, we are aware of them. But right now, we'll now have to come back to the table and said, okay, how do we implement all these beautiful, lofty ideas? How do we bring it to fruition? How do we make it impact on the maximum number of people who are in need in this country? And that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where we are going to be challenged. Are they implementable? Oh, yes. But are the funds available? Are the resources available? The institutional framework, the statutory provisions have already been done. Policies are on the table, but do we have the financial backing of the government to implement everything here to the letter?
Although that then suggests that we've got absolutely nothing to worry about when it comes to the implementation bit.
To the implementation bit, implementation is always the major headache. Beautiful policies, the drawing board is filled with lofty ideas in this country, and we are going to now worry about, can this be realizable? My thought when I looked at the document is, and I'm thinking that the government, two ideas, there are two focal points out of the 7 that connected with me, where I think the number 5, where they talk about strategic collaboration and partnerships. And I'm thinking, yes, there's a whole lot of room for development there. There's a whole lot of room where they could capitalize on and solve some of these the problems. And I'm looking at also the last one, mainstreaming of the SDGs into the social intervention programs of the government. Now, I'll come quickly to them. Strategic collaboration and partnership means that I looked at it. I'm familiar with the humanitarian ecosystem in the country, because I've been involved in the Northeast in several other disaster issues in Benue, Taraba, and all that. And there are a lot of government agencies that invest a lot of money in corporate social responsibilities annually. The CBN, the NMPC, the Nigerian Ports Authority, there are a whole lot of them who invest heavily in corporate social responsibility. Since the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs is also part of the government, there could be a policy position of government that more or less gather everybody to streamline and invest their corporate social responsibility into the public through the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and tie them to the programs that they have developed in this strategic roadmap. And talking about mainstreaming of the SDGs being mainstream, you look at all the focal points in the SDGs, about 18 or 19 SDG programs. Every time government is doing a particular project, we need to lock them together with the SDG. Are we actually making effort and committed to achieving the objectives of the strategic sustainable development goals of the United Nations?
Speaking about getting nooks and crannies and getting everyone on board and not missing out on anything, when focusing on these kind of matters, humanitarian efforts, it appears as though there's attention up north, owing to the insurgency that has displaced thousands of people. But do you think that we might have neglected other groups in other parts of the country?
And sometimes I get that feeling, especially when you look at the policy direction of the government. But intervention-wise, there's a whole lot also happening in different parts of the country. And when you look at the homegrown school feeding program, is applicable all across the country. The conditional cash transfer is not limited to the north. And why we seem to, limit our focus to the north, it's just is a perspective thing. And it's when you look at the number of displaced persons, IDP seems to be so numerous in the north. And you look at the Northeast Development Commission, which has been, giving statutory backing, which is now there, catering for intervention in the northeastern region of the country. People tend to feel like, oh, that's not the only place where there are humanitarian need across the country. Oh, yes, I think particularly about the Niger Delta. I look at the oil spillages. I look at, the environmental hazard people have been subjected to in that region. And that's where the bulk of Nigerians' wealth comes from. I don't think we have done enough in the South. I don't think we have done enough in the rural communities in the Niger Delta, especially as regard with remediation programs, how to get people to be able to, get good water to drink, be able to access farmlands or provide alternative system of farming to them, the hydroponic. Government has not invested enough into that environment. And I think it's a continuous work, and government is a continuum. I think this will still, it will be a thing of concern also for people at the decision-making platform in the country. And I see a lot happening in the future.
All right then, Olutunji Larba, human rights activist, thank you for your time today.
Always. Thank you.
On the outskirts of Kinshasa, capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the usually tranquil village of Kanduti is plagued by hunger as the World Food Programme tries to avert the catastrophe of famine throughout the country. The DRC is among the countries most affected by starvation in the world, with more than 20 million people in desperate need.
The DRC is among the countries most affected by starvation globally, with more than 20 million people in desperate need. Kinditu, a small village, sits at the end of a bumpy track through the savannah, outside the largest capital city in the DRC. There are no grain stores in its straw-roofed hut, no crops or farms along the 35-kilometer dirt road. Through the grassland, just men pushing old bikes loaded with sacks of charcoal under the sweltering sun.
There's no business here. There's no more forest. Our fields are devastated by rodents that eat our potatoes. We have no way to harvest our crops. This is the cause of hunger in the village.
Albertine, 80, is worried about the village's future and wants help.
Concerning the hunger problem, the government should send machines to make the fallow land to cultivate better. They should help us. We face many hardships.
In November 2021, the UN's World Food Programme, WFP, and Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, say the food crisis in the DRC touched a quarter of the vast country's population, nearly 27 million people. And those suffering were not just in the country's conflict zones, but in and around the capital city.
In the DRC, there are 27 million people who are in a crisis or urgent need in terms of food security. Here in Insili, we're in a situation where we're one step away from this famine, which is precisely why the World Food Programme is carrying out this sort of project.
Last year, the WFP teamed up with the UN's children agency, UNICEF, and the government to help locals buy food. The project, which helped to feed 130,000 individuals, aimed to change the people's lives and make them more independent. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
After years of trial and error, Tunisian enthusiast Mohamed Ghassain Noura revives an ancient technique to produce natural purple dye out of sea snails. This was a product that was so expensive in ancient times. The Romans used to restrict its use to only the elite.
A Tunisian history enthusiast is making dye from sea snail shells inspired by a school project decades ago on ancient Carthage and the purple coloring that brought fabulous wealth to the classical world. Mohamed Ghassain Noura works from a hut in his garden to process murex snails using techniques first developed by the Phoenicians to produce a dye known as Tyrian purple that sells online for about $2,500 a gram.
اسمي محمد غسان نويرة مغروم بالتاريخ القديم وأخصائي في استخراج.
Our ancestors used to extract dye from the murex this way. They break the shell of the murex and then extract the gland. After that, they leave it to ferment in salt for 3 days, then put it in a tin container, add other substances, and leave it on the fire between 7 and 8 days until the dye dissolves in the water.
So expensive was the color even in ancient times that the Romans restricted its use to the elite, whose purple French robes became the mark of the Mediterranean's most powerful dynasty.
The wealthy class and notable people were those who used purple dye, especially the Senate members. It is used to generate very big amounts of money to the Romans' treasury.
Mohammed has turned his criticism into encouragement, which motivates him to keep going, as there's always something new to discover in the craft.
From navigating shopping centers to government offices, South Africa's little people say public spaces aren't designed to be accessible for them. One advocacy group in Johannesburg is calling for better support to help people live independently.
Different, abnormal, and very small. Those are just some of the words Olivia Radebe says have been used to describe her in her recently published memoir. The 27-year-old writer says her late grandmother encouraged her to persevere with her studies and with living independently, and she has. But Radebe says she still faces practical challenges navigating life in Johannesburg.
You cannot ask help and not pay someone, because I'm not on a permanent job, and also the money that I get from the government is not enough to sustain me to that certain level whereby I can afford to pay everyone and anyone. It's a bit of a challenge. So in other words, I have to beg someone to help me.
There are hundreds of conditions that cause restricted growth, achondroplasia being the most common, a genetic condition that results in short arms and legs. Radebe was never diagnosed as a child. Now, she says it would be too costly to go to a private specialist to find out. Radebe says she sometimes wonders what her underlying health issue is.
Because at a later stage, I might be having other complications.
Specialized care isn't evenly available across the country. Parents have to look to big cities like Cape Town and Johannesburg to find the best resources for their children who show signs of restricted growth.
Our hospitals in areas like impoverished areas where there's a day hospital. So a parent will go and take the child, but the nurses, the doctors are not aware of the condition that the child has.
Raising awareness about people with dwarfism is one of the main reasons why Piet Nel established the nonprofit Short-Statured Persons South Africa.
That we can share ideas and come together, and also that the public can know what we are about.
The 57-year-old says he struggled with accessibility and discrimination throughout his life. Nel says the organization gives people like him more power to advocate for themselves and their unique needs.
That's why they say nothing about us without us. You can't talk for us, we must talk for ourselves. Like I say, we must stand together and fight for our rights.
And the country, he says, is starting to listen. Nel's group met with South Africa's Social Development Minister to discuss their health and reproductive needs that go unaddressed. He hopes it will be the first step toward bringing more support within their reach. Linda Giftash for VOA News, Johannesburg.
99-year-old Priscilla Sitieni, a non-Nigerian, is showing that age is nothing but a number, as she is the oldest primary school pupil in grade 6 at a school in Kenya's Rift Valley. Sitieni wants to achieve the goal of a lifetime, to pass her exams, obtain her diploma, and become a doctor.
In a stone classroom in rural Kenya's Rift Valley, 99-year-old Priscilla Sitieni takes notes alongside her fellow pupils who are all more than 8 decades younger than her. Wearing her school uniform, Sitieni, who is in her 6th year of primary schooling, says she went back to class to set a good example for her great-grandchildren and to pursue a new career.
When I mentioned to my children that I was going back to school, none of them opposed the idea. Their only worry was how I was going to be able to read the text on my books. Then I told them that I was going to be diligent and learn how to write, step by step, under the teacher's guidance.
The government of the East African nation began subsidizing the cost of primary schooling in 2003, allowing some older members of society who had missed out on education in their younger days to revive their dreams. This catapulted some of the elderly pupils into stardom, including Sitieni, who traveled to Paris last year for the launch of a film about her journey titled Gogo Priscilla. Gogo means grandma in her native Kalenjin language. But Sitieni says her aims were far more practical than becoming a movie star.
I would like to become a doctor, because I used to be a midwife.
Her teachers tap her wide experience to keep the peace during lessons.
I make her to be my class monitor, looking for the noisemakers in class. So she managed to do that work. When I go outside, the class will remain silent. When I am not there, Gogo is doing that and telling them, let us read, let us read. So I find it was something which is actually motivative to me and the pupils.
Apart from learning, the 99-year-old says she also enjoys other school activities, including physical education classes, because although she can't jump as much as the children, it keeps her fit. She hopes her story will be an example to others that no matter their age, they can achieve anything they want to.
A Nigerian charity that teaches chess to children living in the country's slums has received a boost from American socialite Paris Hilton. The media personality's tweets have helped the group, known as Chess in Slums, raise more than $100,000 to expand its program. Timothy Obiezu reports from Lagos.
Arrive in the Oshodi slum community in Lagos, Nigeria for an important assignment. Nigerian chess master Tunde Onokoya and his team at Chess in Slums Africa have been teaching chess here since 2018. Onokoya says the idea is to give kids a better chance at education and in life through chess.
One of my favorite chess analogies is in that innate ability of a pawn in the game of chess to become a queen. So this is deeply reflective in what we're trying to do with Chess in Slums, right? To show that beyond the stories of poverty, right, every child has potential to become so much more.
Oshodi is one of the most dangerous slum communities in Lagos State, with a history of organized gangs, armed robbery, and street violence, making it difficult for kids to thrive. Onokoya's initiative is to change the negative stories with positive thinking and education. He says more than 500 kids from various slums have benefited from his Chess in Slums Africa program, and that the initiative keeps growing.
We started having success stories. A lot of the children we trained started getting scholarship opportunities. They started getting, it now became a gateway to life-changing opportunities for them. Their stories were celebrated in international media, made global headlines.
18-year-old Ojo Ayomide enrolled with the team months ago and is already dreaming big.
I want to be a chess master. Even though I'm a musician. So I can sing. Maybe they want to help me to take me to studio, and I will be going to school.
This month, the initiative gained traction after Paris Hilton, the American socialite and businesswoman, retweeted a notice about the program and joined the campaign to raise $1 million for the project.
Once she did that, Tony and I got in a lot of meetings, and we were like, okay, how do we set up a global ambassadorship project? Because now that Paris Hilton is doing this, we can kind of present the ability to be a global ambassador to her. And that's kind of like the next step, is making sure we have global ambassadors either for fundraising.
For now, Onokoya and his team say with more funds, they will be expanding the Chess in Slums Africa initiative with the goal of reaching 1 million underprivileged African children over the next 10 years. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, and that's our show for today. You can find all the continent's top news and world news online at voaafrica.com. Check it out. I'm Vincent McCory in Washington. Channels Television has our last word from Lagos.
We look forward to bringing you another show next week. Channelstv.com is your source for news and other programming. I'm Chamberlain Uso. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.